I'd first like to introduce Mike Federle, CEO of Forbes. Forbes is a 103-year-old brand that convenes and curates the most influential leaders and entrepreneurs who are driving change and transforming business and making a significant impact on the world. Forbes' international network of editors, journalists, and contributors fuels the creation of content distributed through Forbes.com, Forbes magazine research, and insight reports, signature live events, and much more. Its trusted journalism includes franchises such as Billionaires, 30 Under 30, Forbes 400, and Self-Made Women, to name just a few, and its highly respected investment newsletters. And actually, I was just saying to Mike, when I Googled, I couldn't believe the reach that Forbes has around the world. As a result, Forbes' trusted journalism today reaches more than 120 million people worldwide, and more so during the pandemic. Thank you, Mike, for being with us. Joining Mike in a fireside chat is Ntim. You'll remember Christine from YMCA 175 for those of you that were there. She is the Chief Marketing Officer, Global Startup Ecosystem, and a Forbes 30 Under 30. The Forbes 30 Under 30 list features the latest class of young entrepreneurs, risk takers, and game changers who are redefining what it means to innovate and lead by example. Global Startup Ecosystem is the world's first digital accelerator and leads today as one of the largest digital ecosystem development platforms. With a mission to educate, inspire, and prepare individuals and organizations for the digital age, GSE brings together both private and public stakeholders to address humanity's greatest challenges via exponential technologies and entrepreneurship. Welcome and thank you, Christine. So Mike and Christine, we have a tradition to ask all of our speakers, how are you taking care of your body, mind, and spirit during this crisis? Christine, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. And that's always such a phenomenal question to start with. And I'll candidly say, I just make sure I make time for it. I think, right now with this pandemic, everyone's making time for work and obligations, but this is a great time to actually make time for your mind, for your body, and your spirit. And every single day, I take that time for myself. I take that time with my kids, my husband, and my family. And that's the first thing. And I enjoy it every day through parks, listening to music, jamming out to all the greatest songs that I love from past and present, and making it a priority every single day. So that's how I do that.
Thank you. And Mike, the same question to you. How do you look after your body, mind, and spirit?
No, well, thanks, Patricia, for having me here. And yeah, the thing that I've picked up in the past 2 months since I've been socially distancing is bird watching. And I've become a birder, which is actually a very relaxing sort of pastime, because you have to be very patient and quiet, and there are birds everywhere, so it can be done anywhere, and it's been great. I've discovered all the birds that I never thought about, and I'm actually beginning to understand their bird calls, so I can recognize about a half dozen or so right now, but by the end of this, I'll have a whole new hobby. So it's been great.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Mike. Christine, over to you for your fireside chat. Thanks.
No worries. So first and foremost, thank you so much for this invitation by the YMCA. I'm so happy to connect with everyone. So I hope your energy up is live and ready for this session. Obviously, this is the 6th and the final edition of the World YMCA's Resilient Leaders Talks. So I'm so excited to be a part of this powerful lineup. And I'm sure at the end of this, you guys will have a powerhouse lineup of insight and truly inspiration, because we're going to have really dynamic talks over the course of this conversation. And so I'll start by saying that I wanted to dive into this conversation with Mike, who I've researched profusely prior to this. Forbes needs no introduction, but the people behind it and the activities that Forbes is doing, I think what will bring light and inspiration to this conversation. And at the end of the day, as we transition into this fireside chat, I think it's first important that we note that we're all on this session because we're trying to overcome a global pandemic. And who would have thought the YMCA has been around for over 175 years, and you probably interacted with the YMCA in person, physically at your local YMCA. Fast forward to 2020, we're all connecting online with iconic brands from around the world, powered by the YMCA, virtually online. So I hope you guys appreciate this experience and note that you also are in many ways a part of history. So I just want to give a warm welcome to the World YMCA and the entire stakeholders that made this happen before we transition into this conversation. So let's get started. So Mike, we already had a great introduction over the past couple of days, and we talked about a lot of different topic points regarding this session. And I think we'll start with something that's very pertinent, COVID-19, right? Right now, everything is being redefined in terms of our business culture, society as a whole. And I wanted to start that you're the CEO of an iconic legacy brand, Forbes magazine, that's been around for over a century as well. What decisions are you doing within Forbes magazine to not only get Forbes as a company over the other side of this pandemic, but how are you empowering the communities around you to take you along with you during these times? We would love to hear from you on this.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks, Christine. And thanks to the YMCA. I am delighted to be here today to have this audience. I, like probably everyone on this call, does have a direct connection to the YMCA. As a kid and growing up in Columbus, Ohio, I was part of the Downtown Wise swim team. So I'm very proud to be here today. But on that question, you know, it's interesting. Forbes is 103 years old, but in the very first issue, and our founder, BC Forbes, he, the very first issue, kind of put our mission out there, which was the purpose of business is to create happiness, not to pile up wealth. And when you think about that 103 years later, it is such a germane purpose to what's going on today. And so what we have done in the 2 months since we've kind of gotten deep into this work from home and the pandemic is focus on completely re-engineering our newsroom so that we are providing the kind of information that you know, our audiences are looking for, and that is coming from a trusted source. So we've really upped our game in terms of being deliverers of news and information that people can stay on top of how to deal both personally, financially, and economically or business-wise during the pandemic. So that is really one of the biggest things that we can do is to be that disseminator of good information. And that has been I think one of the real driving purposes of what we've attempted to do over the last 2 months and have done successfully.
It's amazing to hear that. I think, you know, a lot of industry icons follow what Forbes does, right? Because you have for over a century kind of defined the voice of entrepreneurial capitalism, right? People follow Forbes not just because it's a media outlet. In this age, we have tons of media outlets, but we follow Forbes because they showcase the pioneers who are breaking records in business, tech, and culture, but also the ones who are up and coming. Right? So it's amazing to hear how even as a legacy brand, you're already creating new experiences and new opportunities to really bring these communities up to light and really inspire people. Because a lot of times people don't get behind the scenes of organizations like yours to see that, you know, you're also learning as you go. And I think that's inspiring for anyone on the call to learn that Forbes is also learning with what's happening. And I think, you know, as an organization, the global startup ecosystem obviously has not been around for over a century. We've been around for less than a decade, but we live in a times where it's exponential. You know, one defining decision can truly accelerate your reach, your growth, and your impact. And I think what you said, where you started with the mission of how Forbes began, I think was the building blocks of what Forbes become today. And when I think about our mission, Patricia said it earlier, that our mission is to pretty much prepare individuals and organizations for the digital age. This pandemic has skyrocketed, if not accelerated, our company's mission into the forefront. GSC, we actually started out of literally I was coding my first website when I was pregnant with my first daughter, because prior to that, my husband and I, when we started GSC, we used to travel the world and really travel to emerging markets, because we grew up in Haiti, we grew up in Ghana. These are the markets that matter to us. And our mission was, how do we bring these experiences of entrepreneurship, tech, and innovation to these markets? Fast forward to 2017, when we launched our first tech summit in Haiti, where it reached 83 million viewers in the span of 2 days. We literally, for the past couple of years, have been trying to get emerging market icon stakeholders to see that the future is digital, the future does need tech, and that as an ecosystem needs to be prepared for it. And we don't need a pandemic like this one to really see the value of being digital first. So for us, as an organization during this pandemic, we went back to the basics. We started engaging with all of our stakeholders across Africa. Do you have a digital first process? You'll be amazed that, in the US economy, it's already easy for many organizations to transition to virtual, because they've been using apps like Slack, Zoom, GoToMeeting to really digitize meetings and communications. In emerging markets, the relationships are all in person, and it's very experiential. So for them to transition, there's also an upstart in that transition of making remote workforces. And secondly, I say, during this COVID-19 pandemic, as an organization, we not only took the majority of our summits completely online with our most recent summit, Her Future Summit, to empower women around the world. We had over 100 speakers, 3,000 plus delegates, all coming online. And we had iconic speakers like Sophia, the celebrity robot, gave her first virtual keynote on our summits online. And people in Ghana, Haiti, Nigeria, Japan, from around the world was able to engage with this celebrity robot that usually is seen in only certain markets like the US. And so for us, I think, really starting with the basic mission, that's what's going to help brands really outlast this pandemic. And I'm very happy that you started with your mission. I'm very happy that you started with that story and that vulnerable expression of the fact that Forbes is learning as we go, because a lot of people are inspired by brands like Forbes. With that said,
one of the things we're most proud of is this network we've built around the world of under 30s and really entrepreneurs. And with so much division and divisiveness in the world, it's one of the common threads and one of the common real motivators of people around the world is that entrepreneurial spirit. And one of the things we've learned by connecting people around the world through our under 30 program, that we've operated in 20 or so different countries with live events. But the real key to it is the network itself has created all of these really robust working groups, whether it's Forbes the Culture or the Under 30 Network. And initially, our dilemma was, do we try to control that and really manage it? Or do we let it flourish and kind of take its own paths and let people define it? And as you know, from a business perspective, people generally try to control everything and want to manage it. But we've allowed it to flourish. People like yourself doing tremendous things around the world and connecting with one another. And it's really paid off in all sorts of ways, mostly kind of very, it's something to be very proud of at Forbes, that we've built this network around the world.
And I could imagine that wasn't easy to do because, when you have a brand like Forbes, you could literally just pump out one main newsletter to your entire audience of millions of viewers around the world. But you created these specific communities because you understand that within that global community or network that you built over the past century, each one of them have different needs. And one of the things I've observed, which transitioned into my next question with Forbes, is that you built a lot of these communities digitally. So this transition during this pandemic, whether you created Forbes culture online, Forbes 30 on 30 experiences online, or Forbes 8 communities online, I'd like to ask, what do you think the future will look like post this pandemic? Because I think you're a media outlet. And as we understand, mainstream media has inundated people with not only information about this pandemic, but it seems very bleak. How are you feeling as a CEO? You're directing the future, not only of Forbes, but also the millions of viewers that are following you each and every day. What does the future look like post-COVID-19? And how can you inspire people on this session to really follow the direction, the lead that you're doing as the CEO of Forbes to get people to the other side and see an abundant future after this?
Yeah, well, internally, working across all the tools that we have, whether it's Zoom or Slack or any of the other connected tools there, that has gone remarkably well. And I've talked to a lot of CEOs at other companies, and working remotely has, I think, been a surprise to a lot of people in terms of how easy it has been. Now, I do think it works best when everyone's working from home, as opposed to some are in the office, that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see that return to when we do get back to what's the new normal, which will not look like it is today. Things will change, and I think that's one of the big things that will change is people will want to work remotely. Obviously, that kind of the technology transformation that has been going on for 2 decades is going to accelerate in the 20s here, in this next decade. And you're going to see huge change come out of it. Now, from the audience side, that's also, as things get, again, once more get better connected, you're going to have networks of people connecting around the world and addressing issues that they share in common or interests that they share in common with other people. And that's where Forbes is oftentimes the great platform on which to initiate those conversations, in which to enrich the conversations because of our power to convene leaders, thought leadership in all sorts of categories. So to me, this is going to create a real watershed moment of where companies around the world, and as you said, in places where it's not so common right now to have all these networking and software tools, it will be accelerated over the next few years because it will become the necessity on how you communicate and how you operate around them.
Mike, you made a powerful point about this is kind of a global experiment in many different ways, right? That this remote workforce culture works when everyone's on the same platform at the same time, experiencing it together. Because prior to this, I think we had a bias about remote work culture being for a certain type of individuals, mothers or high senior level execs who don't need to work in the office in person. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because as an organization, you also have a very distributed teams. I mean, Forbes offices is all over the world. Can you provide any insight? Because I think a lot of individuals, not only on this session, but within the YMCA ecosystem is trying to figure out a secret sauce to optimize. I mean, you redefined the newsroom. That was one of the changes internally that Forbes magazine did during the course of this pandemic. Post this pandemic, are you going to continue a remote workforce? Are you going to create a hybrid? What advice do you have for organizations that are following, probably from your expertise, on what you see the future of remote work will look like on the other side of this pandemic?
Yeah, well, I think the key, first of all, I'm not going to predict the future because the hardest part right now, and I tell this to my team all the time, is the uncertainty of it all. The uncertainty of when we'll get through the current situation, when we'll be back into more normal interactions with others, when there'll be a virus or a vaccine for the virus. All these uncertainties make it very difficult to plan and to project what's going to happen. We've told our staff do not plan to be back in the office at the very earliest to September 8th. And then we said at the very earliest that could move. How that works when we get back, my intention is to bring everyone back, because I do think teams work best together. But that could change, because I know there's going to be a good percentage of the team that is going to want to continue to work from home and has demonstrated that we can do so effectively. So, that has all sorts of implications on the expenses that we create in office buildings and how that may change. And I can conceive of a scenario where Forbes could stay virtual and remain a work from home and not have a central gathering place. It's possible, because it does work, and the tools are only going to continue to get better. So with my staff, though, I think the most important thing now is that we continue to create a really good dialogue back and forth, which requires kind of transparency and trust. And I try to do this through town hall meetings, through a weekly newsletter, which we've titled, or a weekly email I send out on Mondays titled Checking In and Caring for One Another. Because right now, that's the real driver, is how do we take care of one another on the team to make sure everyone, whether from a work work profile or mental health or just well-being, and trying to understand what, as individuals, different people are going through, because there are varying levels of people who are really being affected by the virus. So to me, I think if we can get the team through it in that sense of genuinely wanting to take care of them, and not go to kind of the knee-jerk reaction of, hey, we have to save the business, we have to cut a lot of people, we have to cut costs. Mm-hmm. Take a different point of view of how do we nurture one another, including our audiences, by keeping them informed and engaged in what we're doing. And we've done that by launching a lot of new products and a lot of new opportunities for groups to get together. We have Forbes forums in Slack, which are invite-only groups of different sectors, whether women, CIOs, CMOs. We have different groups who are participating in those, as well as we're orchestrating a hackathon led by professionals in different industries, but driven by the under 30s who want to volunteer to take on a specific challenge. And we'll be announcing that shortly. So we're trying to activate and engage both our internal employees, but also external audiences.
Yeah, and before I transition to this final question before we close, I think, you said some really unique things. 3 things that stood out to me from what you said is, one, this weekly kind of update from the CEO that you send out to your entire workforce. I think communication from the top is going to be very, very important during this crisis. It's authentic, and it gives them a sense of what you are processing on a regular basis, because you're obviously probably inundated with multiple decisions on a regular basis. The second thing you said is regarding the remote workforce and this digital experience, and that expectation. I think, when it comes to mental health right now, I think global depression is at an all-time high, and giving your workforce that, ability to plan is just you can't plan the future, but that understanding that let's just make sure our expectations is as far back as possible. Because I haven't heard that before, where a CEO has said, let's just, at the very least, earliest is September. That way, if it comes back earlier, the expectations and the reaction to that is a lot more probable for individuals. individuals as a whole. So I think that was very dynamic that you were able to showcase and highlight that, because I think a lot of organizations, especially the young people on this call, need to really set their expectations for this new future and this new normalcy, because it's impacting so many lives. And for us at GSC, very similar, giving people globally the expectations. And for us, you know, aside from bringing people digitally together via these digital communities, we went straight into training mode, like training people and preparing people for this global workforce culture, regardless of whether we go back to a sense of pre-normalcy. So last month, I know we did a future of work boot camp, 6 hours, where we are training individuals about all the tools and steps they need to even be remotely productive, because there's an inclusion and diversity mechanism that we need to discuss before someone can even be a remote worker. And in talking to organizations, if they actually have not only the tools, because you can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't have the right structure and processes to leverage those tools, it's almost like that kind of comical sketch that people have. You could bring a horse to water, but if they don't want to drink, it doesn't really matter, right? And so it's really getting people prepared for that future. So I'll end with this final question before I pass it back over to Patricia, is that the YMCA as an organization has been truly inspiring the youth and the future generation. And right now, this current generation during this pandemic is being pretty much overwhelmed with a bleak future. Work opportunities are decreasing. We're probably entering another, if not major recession, close to depression experiences right now. How do we inspire the youth leaders, but also the youth individuals to know that, you know, organizations like the YMCA and Forbes and GSC, we've seen pandemics before, we've seen hurdles, but there is a way to prepare yourself and be inspired for the future. What 3 things, not that you would say to young people, but to your children, Mike, what do you tell your children to prepare for what's to come tomorrow, so that they know that despite what's happening with this pandemic, they are actually built for this and ready for this? They just have to see it themselves. What do you say?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I get a lot of calls right now from younger folks asking for career advice, or what do I do at this point? The number one thing, attribute, I'll say, that people need right now, really whatever stage of your career you're in, but for young people, is this sense of adaptability. You have got to be ready to change. And if you're uncomfortable with change, you're in the wrong century. Because things are going to continue to change, and to be the ability to adapt and to shift course quickly is going to be a really, I think, key attribute that companies are going to look for. And it's hard to recognize that until you actually see it in action, that people are willing. Because right now, as we've gone to this new work environment, you've seen people who have really embraced it in the sense of, you know, they feel even a greater mission than they felt before. As journalists, the mission to inform and to educate. On the business side, the mission to solve problems that marketers are having, or internally that we're having in terms of getting things to market. And so, you know, that idea of adaptability and participation, of jumping into the fire rather than run away from the fire, to use that analogy. And I tell everyone right now, I hope everyone's keeping a journal, because we are living history right now, and we're making history. And it'll be important. The same way I asked my parents, what was it like in the Great Depression? Our kids and grandkids will ask us, what was it like in the Great Pandemic? So I'd say those are kind of 3 things I would tell everyone. You know, remain open-minded and adaptable to change, and also record what's going on right now, because we are making history.
Wow, can we get a couple of virtual claps on the chat feed, because you just truly came out with such powerful messages. I think there are a couple of sound bites in that. One, if you're not adaptable, you're living in the wrong century. And I think that was a powerful thing for our young generation, if not our current workforce, to truly embrace that fluidity, that flexibility to just be experimental, be open to opportunity, no matter how it comes at you, was so powerful in that. Second, this conversation about journaling the experience, because I think we get so caught up in our daily routines, whether it's virtual or in person, to not document our experiences, because who we are, if you think about it, this pandemic started 2 months ago. We never would have thought that this is where we would be today, right? So imagine a couple weeks from now, a couple months from now, just really understanding the world through your eyes by documenting that experience. Because at the end of the day, history is made up of the stories of legends, but also the small and everyday people who are experiencing it globally as a whole. And so I'll end by saying that, you know, as an organization, even as an individual, I appreciate you sharing those insights, not only the background of what Forbes has done during this pandemic, insights as to how we could also lead by example by following your lead and what you've seen, but also I hope that everyone on this call was inspired by both the experiences that Forbes is going through as a legacy brand, even experiences as us as an organization that we're literally training entire economies and countries. I would never have thought that as someone who was born in the States, grew up in Haiti, literally talking to my president on a regular basis about how to digitize an entire economy for an entire country, if not an entire region. And so that's the future, where the future, there are no longer the same barriers that we've seen a century ago. Right now, value is key. People are going to redefine value and productivity completely differently, which is why this conversation of remote workforces is going to really inspire. But second, the most powerful people of the future are not going to be the strongest or the smartest, but to your point, is going to be the ones that are adaptable and ready for that change. So with that, I want to thank you, Mike, for your insight and your openness to sharing your experiences and your perspective on this. But also, I want to give a huge thank you to all of the participants on this call who was able to engage with this conversation, because as I stated before, we are living in exponential and unprecedented times. And so now's the time to really be prepared for it, not in the way you expected, but the way you were born to do it. So please be happy, be well, live your life in the best sense. And a huge shout out to the YMCA for leading this conversation. Thank you so much, Mike. It was an honor.
Thanks, Christine. No, it's great. Fearlessness is another attribute which I see that you have, so that's great.
Oh, thanks so much. You know, we have so many comments on our chat line, just powerful dialogue. Thanks so much to you both. Gwinnell, you know Gwinnell Apollon, of course, and he's saying, wow. Thank you, Christine. It was just a wonderful, and Mike, I know you have to leave. We're not going to get a chance to ask some of those questions. If we do have a couple of questions that are pertinent to you, can we ask you if you would respond to them?
Yeah, that's fine, please.
Okay, so we'll get those questions to you and get the responses back. So thanks very much. It was just a real pleasure to listen in on this dialogue. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
In order to capture opportunity in adversity and shape the post-crisis future, how will you maintain viability and also innovate around new opportunities?
Oh, that's a really cool question. And I think it starts, first and foremost, a question around, you know, how do you pretty much prepare and have be viable for what's happening? It goes back to that conversation about adaptability. First, it starts with confidence. I think people truly underestimate how influential you already are to start any initiative, to pivot, to relearn and reshape what you're doing as an organization or as an individual. I think one thing that this pandemic has shown, that even small companies, startups, individuals can make just as much as a crazy impact as a legacy, huge organization that's been around with all the powers that be. I mean, you're seeing all around the world, people are doing relief funds. Sometimes individuals are raising millions of capital to support people in their community that are struggling. People are doing initiatives out of their backyard to support elderly. So you just need to first start with the confidence to know that you have a lot more power to really do something during this pandemic or during these times than you really think. And second, you know, when it comes to war strategy, people say, like, you know, war has been won without a plan, but not everything goes to plan. And I think this time has shown that, not everything is going to be under your control. And so you need to be very fluid with understanding that you need to just go for it. Our organization at the GSC, we've been known for our tech summits. People didn't even know that GSC is actually the first digital accelerator on the planet until this pandemic. And so there's a humility to understand that even though people don't know your complete sense of capacity, this is a time for you to leverage the digital space, social media, your emails, your posts, your WhatsApp messages to show people your potential and be ready for it. Because at this point, no one is judging anyone for trying right now. There's so much experimentation going on that everyone's figuring it out together. So if there was ever a time for you to make bold choices and bold moves, this is the actual time. Because at the end of this pandemic, people are going to ask, what did you do? And you don't want to be the person that just stood there and just was watching everyone do something and not putting yourself out there. So I wish you guys to just go for it, because there is learning happening every single second during this pandemic.
Christine, we are a very small organization. We depend on our support services. We need to adapt and change to new ways of servicing the community, especially keeping in mind the large unemployment rate that COVID will leave behind. In which places, like a website or other space, can we find a guide and opportunities to work to promote micro enterprises in extremely vulnerable sectors of our community under the umbrella of the YMCA? So asking for Forbes websites or resources that might help a YMCA like Carlos in Salto, Uruguay, create micro entrepreneurship for young people.
Okay, so pretty much you're asking resources to support you through this crisis in terms of a micro entrepreneurship for your community, but also the deeper point to your questions is also how to prepare and leverage resources that are already out there. The first thing I would say, you said you're a small organization or a small YMCA location. I want you guys to understand the power of being small. Sometimes big is not your biggest weapon. So one thing I would say is that because you're small, let's say you have less workers, less people, less stakeholders, you can move incredibly fast because you don't have as many decision makers in your organization like an enterprise or a corporate company to make actual decisions immediately. And right now, this pandemic, if you're seeing the stock market right now, literally companies are dying almost every single week, especially mega companies, which is why I'm so proud of the YMCA and making this transition, because what you're seeing is that small, localized communities are actually getting faster and quicker because you have less things to worry about in terms of decision making, the skills to actually make action, right? You're just moving. So be powerful in the fact that you are small. The second thing I would say, when it comes to resources, there are two ways to get the resources and information you need as either a local YMCA or trying to empower people in your community to leverage resources within the YMCA. First and foremost, I would say do the research, but sometimes you could be lazy about it. Put a Google alert on anything that you're trying to find and make it go to a direct email account. And that email account, when you check it every day, is not going to your personal email account, but it's kind of like your research pandemic jar of information that you need, everything that you need. So I would put remote work as a Google alert term, so that way it comes to your inbox on a daily basis. Relief funds, right? Mental health and wellness. COVID-19, right? So that way you're getting information that's coming out, because what's happening, we actually have a COVID-19 tracker. I can send this out to DJ. It's a public database of 1,000 resources that's being given from the likes of Facebook, Google. All these mega companies are actually already giving free PDF guides, research guides, and resources. They're even offering free grants and perks. There are companies who are giving millions away in resources for free right now to help organizations like local YMCAs to get through this. So you could use the GSC COVID-19 database, or you could create one for yourself by doing that type of like alert tracker going directly to your email. So that's the first thing. Empower yourself with the information. Second, there has to be one person on your team that you make is the lead for COVID-19 preparedness in the way that they have to be on point with finding information and applying to these opportunities. Because what's happening is that everyone is scared within an organization. Let's say you have a 5-member team and no one's taking accountability for focusing on one part of this pandemic. One person could be in charge of just finding information. One person could be in charge of just applying for opportunities. One person could be in charge of like disseminating these opportunities to your community. So you need to actually kind of reframe roles within your organization, not based on title, CEO, CMO, Chief Innovation Officer, but based on value. What do we need right now during this pandemic, and how can we readjust everyone's roles? And the final thing I would say in terms of empowering your communities, get inspired by what's being showcased today. I mean, Forbes magazine was on this session. This is an unprecedented opportunity. This is a magazine that has been showing every single day stories of people making an impact. Use those stories to not only be informed, but to be inspired. If someone in your neighborhood is able to give 20 meals to the elderly, literally just by themselves, imagine what you as an organization could do. And a lot of times people say, well, we don't have the resources or we don't have the funds to make the impact. YMCA locations are struggling around the world because the YMCA was built on giving empowerment a space that's shut down right now. So you have to do is appeal to your community and say, what can we do that we have the innate resource to do right now during this pandemic, and give that. Because you might be underestimating the power of what resources you already have available to give to those communities digitally. So if you have an email list, YMCA, let's say you're in Ecuador and you have an email list of 300 people for your local YMCA, are you giving them weekly newsletters of resources that you are finding that's on the internet so they could empower themselves? Are you showcasing to them, like, again, I'm Haitian. I'm seeing street vendors creating face masks out of bamboo and trash right now across Haiti, in Kenya, and Nigeria, and around the world. These are street vendors who you would thought don't even have the money or the resources to create mega ventilators like GE, but they're doing it. How are you empowering local street vendors to tell them, like, hey, you may not have the same resources to create thousands of supplies during this pandemic, but have you thought about leveraging your talent to create products for these organizations in this simple way, like a face mask? People are using socks to make face masks. So I'll summarize by saying that you are a lot more powerful in this situation than you think. As a small organization, you can be fast and nimble right now. And second, do the research by making it easy. Use Google Alert so that way, anytime there's an opportunity that goes on about remote work or remote resources or relief funds during this pandemic, you get it straight to your inbox, and readjust the roles of your local YMCA team to make sure someone's accountable for finding this information and disseminating it through the community. And third and finally, be aware that you may not be able to do everything, but you can empower your ecosystem to be able to do something during this pandemic and learn from it. So hopefully that was helpful to you, because I really think that you have a lot more power to do something about this to benefit yourself and your community in ways that you probably don't even see right now. So best of luck with it.